a live recording of the podcast, maybe. I'll do this straight as well. As soon as we go live, you start talking about other things.
Leslie, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. Katie, Sarah.
Love it. Love it, love it,
Gustavo.
love it. This is a good effort for 8 o'clock GMT.
Great.
So we'll just give it a couple of minutes or a couple 30 seconds or whatever, and then I'll run through my intro and I can never remember the word. It's not housework. What's the word I'm looking for when I say it?
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
I get around to.
I love that.
All
Leslie's
those phrases.
Yeah.
I love it that Leslie's had wine now. I feel like the Q&A could get spiced up. So
Yes, Leslie. Although I do have to admit, when we had dinner, so my wife was making dinner and she was like, "Do you want a drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, there's a bottle of wine in the fridge." So I have had a little small glass. I was like, I'll cap it because I won't be able to read my welcome script. So as I say, all good things must come to an end. Joe and I have had an amazing 2 days hosting some incredible speakers and having conversations with everyone that's shown up to talks and on social and Facebook group. I think anybody who's been looking at the hashtag or like the engagement, you can see like there's people who are very keen on the content and very appreciative of what's going on. And Joe and I are so glad that we've been able to spark some of those conversations, and we're seeing different attendees talk to each other. It's not just us talking to people, and that's the kind of thing that we wanted to get out of this. So from both of us, thanks so much for being part of the Humans Come First Summit. It's the first summit we've run. We're definitely planning on doing it again, and like we can't wait to bring like more amazing speakers to that and see more of you join us as well. So we also want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, AdRoll, one last time. The support they've given us to launch this has been amazing. So help us show them it was worthwhile for them as well. They put their money into this, so let's show them they actually got something back out of it. So go and check out the Growth Gorilla community at adroll.com/community. It's definitely worth having a flick through it. There's some great content in there, and it's designed to bring marketers together, which is what we're all about. So thankfully, this is my last housekeeping note of the summit. Make sure you're using the HCF Summit hashtag if you're using anything on social. So make sure you're getting out there so we can tie this all together and actually see what conversations are going on. And if you've got any questions, throw them in the Q&A panel, because that way we can make sure we're asking the right things. Some of you would have been on the talk with Julia earlier. I'm guarantee you all have had some questions kind of pop up since then. Like my brain's been spinning since that. We've also got Barry and Steve on the call as well, and me and Joe, who are just going to sit here and look pretty while the others say smart things. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to all of the final guests of the summit, and we're going to have some great conversations around customer success and what that actually means in 2020, because it's one of those big kind of statements or like departments that people throw around, and I want to get to the crux of it. Like, what does that actually mean? So first up, we have Six and Flow's very own new boy, although you're not actually the new boy because we've had several new starters since Barry started. But Barry McPhillips is our client services director at Six and Flow, with previous experience from agencies like Purple down in London and TBWA. He joined us during lockdown, and now within our organization, he owns the client relationship. So if anything that is client related, he is the kind of the pinnacle of that structure, if that kind of makes sense. The pinnacle of the structure is probably not what I really mean, but you get where I'm going. So Barry's here to give us an insight into how customer success works from a services perspective, because quite often when we talk about customer success, we're talking about it from a product-led business perspective. So that's where Barry's coming from this. Next up, we've got Steve Pocross. So Steve is CEO of Verblio, one of the most exciting platforms in the content marketing space. So we've used it a ton of times. We have clients that use it, and it's definitely something that if you are in the content marketing space and you're looking at ways to scale that, you should definitely check it out. And actually, Steve, you know your platform a lot better than I do, obviously. Do you want to give us a quick one-liner on what is Verblio and why should people care?
Sure. We consider ourselves the next generation of content creation marketplaces. We're a combination of a highly curated group of about 1,000 writers, segmented by 39 verticals, put together with the SaaS platform to get content creation done easily. And we work for about 1,000 clients every month and do about 70,000 pieces of unique content per year.
Nice.
That's an amazing one-liner. I'd say
that.
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like you've done that before, Steve.
That is a real tight pitch. That's great.
It's a lot earlier here in Colorado.
which is good that we don't all have glasses of wine in our hand, because we would look like at Alkies because of the time difference, but that's fine. So, and last but not least, we have Julie Hogan, VP of Customer Experience at Drift, back to join us again with her amazing, like after the amazing talk that she gave us earlier in the day. So Julie, thank you for giving us another hour of your time. It's massively appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
I know that based on the comments that we got after the last one, it's like people are very excited to have you back again as well.
Thank you.
So welcome everybody. I'm going to start off with throwing a question out to the room, and it's the one that all of the other interviews and kind of panels I've tried to start with, and it kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. What's your biggest fuck up in customer services in the past year? Who wants to start?
Not it.
Barry,
I'm going to pick on you.
I'll go. Right. Okay. So earlier on this year, I was pitching with a sales director for a big piece of business for Electrolux. And long story short, my sales director had to go to hospital whilst I was waiting for the plane from Heathrow to go to Brussels to meet all these heads of marketing and sales directors from all over the world. And he'd failed to brief me on what was required. So I was left with the choice of, do I get on the flight or do I go and wing it? I went and winged it and walked into a room with 30 odd very senior people from all parts of the world, expected me to talk to them about their customer onboarding. And I had not prepared anything. There was no brief. I didn't have anything to work with. And I had to wing it. I got pens, piece of paper, Post-it notes, and I turned it into a workshop. And it was the best workshop that the guys had. And that turned into a £3 million piece of business. So it wasn't that much of a fuck up, but it could have easily been.
I feel like you've cheated there. There's no egg on your face there.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I didn't feel that pain.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I was going through pain for about 8 hours that day. Trust me.
My biggest,
Steve.
mine don't actually be an F up, which is so we have a self-service marketplace, which is the way the business started. You come in, you create content at your own level, but it required a lot of interaction in the marketplace. And then we slowly built up a bigger professional services department that basically will let you integrate with our ecosystem in the way that best works for your company. But what I didn't know is we didn't have a way to go in between those two. So we, so we had one of our largest clients come in, decided they want the full account management package. We were taking care of everything. We had it set up for them. They were saying we were hitting their goals, and they decided they wanted to save some money, do it internally, and move to the self-service marketplace. So we just completely didn't pay attention to them because they didn't have an account manager anymore, and they had no idea what they were doing. And we had given them none of the tools and didn't watch out to them until they started to scream at me that this just wasn't working right. So we now have a new way to pay attention to high potential clients that are moving back and forth between both, but that hurt a lot.
For sure.
Some of the best lessons are learned with a bit of pain, though.
Yeah. I think the one I'll share, it's a long and a deep one, if that makes sense. It's sort of like a strategic F up for how I've thought about CS, which is when I look at team growth and I also look at like the stage that we had gone through, not paying enough attention at what point you really needed to segment and differentiate the journey of the customer. And so I now am responsible for customer experience and sort of pulling myself out and looking at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this should have been an exercise that took place 3-4 years ago. And the impact of that is you end up, and I think a lot of CS people feel this, with people post-sale doing so many different things without being really clear on exit criteria. So you get somebody from point A to point B in onboarding, what must happen in service to that customer moving to the next stage so that you're guaranteeing healthy cohorts of customers that are moving through the journey and moving through the cycle. So, hindsight being 2020, but I look back and I'm like, what an idiot. Like, why did I not do that? And why did I not open my eyes to this whole other world of strategic process mapping that is so important to setting the right foundation for bringing your customers along? So that I live with the pain of that one for a while.
So in reverse order and conversely, what are you most proud of in CS in 2020?
What am I most proud of? I mean, I talked a little bit about this in the talk earlier, but when I think about how CS has evolved for us at Drift, we really think about the customer not just being owned by one group, but the experience of that customer across the journey that they have with us, and how we were able to really establish listening channels and understand what our customers needed. I think in 2020 especially, it's very easy to try to figure out the right balance between business as usual and the things you need to do to drive momentum for your business to get through where we are. But then also really listening and understanding, okay, hey, like we may want this one thing, but our customers need this. And if we genuinely want to be customer centric, we have to pivot and make changes here. So we shifted from an advisory board investment to customer networking investment. We put a lot of energy on focusing on an actual like COVID relief project, which meant like if we had a customer who genuinely wanted to stay with us but couldn't, working with them and figuring out what's the path to exit and come back when times are better, and like truly understanding the right model for that. That takes a lot of energy and effort that nobody ever has, but we had to find it. We had to make it happen. So I'm very proud that we took pause and pivoted to the things that we knew our customers needed.
I love that. And if I can just quickly donate my own fuck up as an example of where that goes wrong.
Please do.
Then quite early on into COVID, I think, we did a really great job, to be fair, with the marketing meetup in sort of pivoting, our event schedule and stuff like that online. But I was figuring out how to use Zoom for the first time. So I was playing around with the automations and specifically the automation with folks who signed up for events but did not attend. And this was never intended on seeing the light of day, but I think I changed the automation to something along the lines of, it was really sad to miss you, we really gutted, but then again, why would you sign up for something and not turn up for it, or something like that, which was mortifying. And inevitably that did go out, and unfortunately that was in like the second week of COVID or something like that. And inevitably what happened was I got a few emails back sort of saying, well, that's quite out of character and stuff like that, and had to go out with like the full apology email.
I remember that one well, because it was that you sent that the morning of that we recorded our second ever podcast, and we recorded them over Skype, and I could see his face and he was ashen. It was one of my top moments of 2020 for me.
Can I ask you a question, Joe? How did you recover? Because I do think moments like that, especially when they're public, the response and recovery often is even more interesting and can create opportunities for sort of building empathy and partnership with customers, where they're like, hey, you owned it. People make mistakes.
Absolutely. Well, I did exactly that the next day. I sent an email to everyone that had received that email and said, look, I'm really sorry. It was never intended to see the light of day, but these things happen. I'm quite fortunate that my audience is a bunch of marketers in a sense, so they probably understand that these things happen. But it was not the right time. It was not the right place. So I just held my hands up and said, look, I'm really, really sorry. The responses were that I'd say probably 60% didn't reply. About 30% replied with I actually respect you more for that. And then probably 10% were like, yeah, that was a bad move. So, these things do happen. But it was definitely an example where, to your point, which you were raising, Julie, then listening went wrong. Because, there was probably part of me which thought it was funny. But, I think 2020 is a year where folks, even if they're receptive to your message in normal times, will probably have a different mindset. So segmentation in a traditional sense doesn't really apply in the same way as it used to, certainly in terms of headspace, at least.
I like, Julie, I like that point on like the response piece being the important bit. So like, and we've talked about this at like several different talks across the last 2 days, is people talking about like the empathy and showing, not showing weakness, but showing like those flaws can be endearing in the process. I think like an example that I always remember is, do you remember a couple of years ago with Drift where AdRoll, the Google AdWords like locked it out and basically marked it as spam and killed it for every site that was using Drift, and it was like it went nuclear for a couple of days. And like it was shit, and like that like stuff happens, but like the way that you guys dealt with it, I think like you sent all your customers like the video from you and Elias, like you sat down in a room, like one of the co-founders, and you kind of sent an apology and kind of like, here's what we're trying to do. And it was about the response to that. And you could sense that you could all care. And I think even in the social, you could see like some of the, like Elias running around in the background from like monitor to monitor, trying to work with the dev team. So you could see that there was a response and an activity, like action going on in the background.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. And it's, I think too, in times like that, like when there is something and you have to bring people in, and this maybe goes into some of the conversation we have today, like CS for sure is the front line, but you need to bring in other people from the organization at certain times, because they need to know that it's not just you and your team working like through other people. You want to see those people involved. And so if there's a dev issue or a tech issue and it's really that critical, like, yeah, get the CTO and talk to them about the importance. There's no better way to be customer centric than ensuring that those people are front and center, talking about those issues and giving confidence to the people who are listening on the other side that like, oh, wow, this entire company really lives behind what they talk about.
So that's a nice segue. Thanks for that, Julie. Into the main question. What is customer success in 2020? So not so long ago, it used to be about onboarding, reducing churn. And then there's like, if we throw in like COVID into the pot as well, and kind of geopolitical events and everything that's going on across the world, what is customer success now? Like, how do we define that? Who wants to jump in first?
That's a big question, Rich. That's a big question.
That's right, mate. We still got 45 minutes.
I think at the end of the day, yes, COVID has affected majorly on the surface how people are living their lives. But I think the core tenets of customer service still apply, which is about the empathy. It's about knowing your customer. I've worked an awful lot in financial services, and knowing your customer is absolutely paramount to trading and business. And that applies to sort of consumer marketing and B2B market. The more you know your customer, the more you can deal with it, anticipate needs, get out in front of situations. And I think that along with do what you promised that you would do and execute against it and follow through afterwards, those tenets still stand up. COVID, no COVID, you know, the world in 20 years, I think those basic needs still really ring true in any service environment.
Steve, what do you think?
So it's funny, we don't think of customer success as a different department. My company has about 25 people with our 1,000+ writers. And so the whole company is customer success. So we think about we have a brand promise. We're supposed to be the friendliest content creation business in the platform in the business that creates high quality content at scale for every niche. And so if we're doing that naturally, we should do as much of it up front, and the system should just work. And that's part of our brand promise for customer success. And it's not going to work all the time because it's a platform that involves humans. So clearly it's going to break down. And then we just have to have an empathetic response and we want every single interaction with my team to make you feel better about working with us. And for me, that feels like success. And the third piece is we should be looking at, we always think about what we are doing and are we living up to what we said. But the customer success team for me is figuring out what we're supposed to be doing next, because every client interaction is an opportunity to do some research about, we had one idea of what we should be doing to help them before. And especially if you're building a platform, it's hard to understand market research. We have 1,000 clients, 2,000 businesses we write for every month. Which ones should we listen to, and which ones are giving us big themes that we should react to quickly? So these are kind of the 3 steps that I think of.
So, and like the interesting point I put out is, and like I love that brand promise of like you want to be the friendliest platform. Like it's a great thing to aspire to. How do you balance that, or how do you maintain that when you're trying to build a self-service platform? So like, how do you maintain like that friendliness, which I feel, and it's subjective obviously, but I feel like friendliness is probably a human trait potentially. I guess you could kind of automate that kind of like an attitude, a friendly attitude into something. But so how do you balance those 2 things?
Well, I'm sure there are a bunch of technologists out there who feel like, of course, we can still be human while building technology. So I think you can build it into the platform. So there's so many touch points with customers. We've touched on a bunch of these already. You have So your client emails, your chat functions, everything, your wording on your page, what does your website say? So like, how would you want to be treated? And then how do you make it engaging and interesting? Like these people, like our agencies are 2/3 of our business. Agencies are creative people who want to be doing interesting language. They don't want to be reading boring stuff. So try to be provocative and clever with our wording, with our language. We want to stand out. And then we just came out of a hackathon where one of our big projects is how do we make giving feedback to our writers? It's so important, more engaging. So we're looking at creating our own custom emojis where it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to write a paragraph to this writer about what I want to see next, but you can really express yourself in kind of modern ways, and it's built in. And we expect to see a lot more interaction with our people through the technology to get there.
I love that,
Like-
Steve, because it brings your brand voice to life in a way, right? And Rich, what you were saying too, what I find so interesting is I think like in customer success, we often think first line of defense is people. Like that experience has to be with people. And when you talk, I actually use the experience of our own co-founders. If we were to buy Drift when our company was 10 people, I can tell you with 100% certainty, our co-founders would never get on the phone with a CSM. They would want to self-serve because that's who they are. They're entrepreneurs. They like to tinker. They want to figure things out. And so understanding who your customer is and what they need and being able to align that experience with their needs, it doesn't mean, and I think like this is a big thing I've had to get over in success and experience, which is like a good experience doesn't mean you are concierge with a human the whole time. In fact, that may turn off some of your potential customers because they're like, I really have to do this with a person every single time. You don't have the technology to curate the path for me forward. And so to your original question, Rich, of like, where is customer success going? I do think there was like this 10-year period of defining what it is, separate from sales, separate from user experience, separate from products, so that there was somebody on the other side of that line to ensure that a customer was going to optimize what they bought and actually see value. And now I think the next 10 years is like, all right, we threw people at that, but now there are all these other things that have to happen. And like, what really needs to be a human touch? What needs to be a personalized touch? What is an automated touch? What is a product touch? And how do you bring all that together in service to knowing exactly who your customers are, their profiles, their needs, and the segments they're in? And so I think you're going to start seeing so much more attention to that other side of the funnel in the same direction that you've seen for years with demand gen and sales and all the operating components that happen there. CS, and I think it's a benefit to CS. If I'm a CSM, I'm like, finally, the help that I've needed for these past 10 years, I have infrastructure and revenue attached to helping me do my job better.
It's funny because like a big part of my job and a big part of what we're known for when we work with platforms like Drift is that we are trying to humanize those platforms. So we will put like tongue in cheek into it. We will try and make them feel more playful. And equally, me as a person, when I'm trying to get support on something, I don't want to speak to somebody. Like I would much rather go through chat. I would rather use the FAQs. I don't want to have to go through that process of actually talking to another human. But still, when I think of CS, I still think of, I'm almost have that, and it might just be because I can see you with a headset on, Julie, that I'm thinking of call center, but I think it's like, that's the kind of image I get in my head when I start to think of customer success or customer support, probably more than success.
I think also just following on from that, I think if we think about the customer, we as businesses, we set up to think in buckets: pre-sales, sales, post-sales, onboarding, customer success, customer complaint handling. But actually, the customer themselves doesn't differentiate. They are having an experience, whether that's a good one or a bad one. They don't think in marketing terms, in sales terms. So I think when we talk about seamless experiences, as businesses, we really need to start to remove some of the silos in the way in which we run our businesses.
I think just to add to this, it's funny because Rich, you don't want to speak to a human, but I do, you know, and actually I find myself endlessly.
Because you're a lovely person, Joe.
Well, no, it's because I've spent a lot of time interaction with, you know, like supposedly complete documentation on how to do every little thing, and inevitably it isn't complete, or it's not the same. And it's at that point I find it endlessly frustrating that there isn't a phone number on these sites. So I think, to Julie's point here as well, it's about listening and understanding what the customer wants at any one point, and realizing, in fact, this would be interesting to turn into a question. Do you prioritize, your top customers and say, these are the folks who do not want to speak to people, and therefore we are going to serve those people and not prioritize phone numbers, as an example? Or do you say that we have to serve every one of our customers, and therefore we invest in a phone service as well? And where does the balance come?
Yeah, such a good question. I can jump in, because I also think too, so much of what happens and so much of people's perception has to do with their last and worst experience somewhere else, and also like your own bias you bring to it. And so some people may say no phone service means someone gets less than, and then the big customers get more than. And it really, the feedback I always share is it always comes down to who you're working with and how that business operates and what they need. And so for us, we work with sales and marketing teams, and the further you sort of expand into an enterprise business, you genuinely need a person with a skill set that is probably closer to a Big Four consultant or project manager, because you're not dealing with somebody who's going to adopt a product and move on and set it and forget it. You are engaging likely with a 10 to 12 person committee and team across functions that requires ongoing optimization. So that job is marked, it's just so different than working perhaps with a 2-person company trying to get set up. And what we take a look at is like, what's the optimization of engagement and where do people tend to spend the most time? And what we had found was that most of the companies in that environment were like, could you please just make this easier for me to do it on my own? And if I need help, I'll tell you, versus you must talk to me in order to pass go. So that's how I think about it, and how we've thought about it. I'm sure it's different for businesses, but my recommendation always is like, think less about your own internal operation and more about how the customers on the other side operate, and what does that mean in terms of you getting them down the most efficient path to seeing value from what you offer as a company.
But so how do you balance that line between, because when you talk like efficient path, and you were talking about some of the CS tools that are like the tools that are coming in to make your CS job like easier, and like, here's the support you've needed as a CS person. How do you balance off the efficiencies that you need versus the efficiency that the clients need, the client is looking for? Because if you talk to somebody in a call center and they're like, yeah, we're looking at a chatbot, the main reason they want a chatbot is because they want to divert people away from the phone. That's an efficiency for them, not for their client. So how do you balance that?
Right. You have to understand it, right? And that I think is part of it. And it's a really good point, because this is where you also have to put in that separation between product usage and setup and strategy. And I think too, when we talk about where is CS going and what are some of the challenges teams and companies face, you may have a post-sale or CS program that does a really, really good job of getting your solution set up, but does a poor job on that ongoing optimization and like tying back usage to strategy. And so that becomes a key component, really understanding like, what is it that you're setting this up for, and who are the recipients on the back end of this, and how do you make that come together? So I think like the sort of like a broader answer to that is deeply understanding and making that part of your strategy, with setup, with adoption. What does this in service do from a strategic standpoint, and how do we make sure the purpose of people who are supporting you, or the purpose of programs supporting you, are aligned with strategic setup and usage of tool, and others are aligned with making sure you're getting value and it's optimized for your unique use case. I don't know if Barry, Steve, you have a different opinion on that, but that's how I tend to think about it.
I think you're right. I also think some other things which complicate things but are not in any least importance is the I've done a lot of work in the past around impairments, disability, sight, sound impairment, and being able to provide a service for those people in a way that is equal to service provided to everybody else. And I think when we talk about service design, we have to think of every user in every way possible, and that makes it difficult for organizations to shape and to provide the right infrastructure to be able to deal with that. But that's a point which, I'm not saying big organizations overlook, but they can overlook. And that's where, I think as a customer service and customer experience designer, we need to consider all those things in the round.
So I agree with the sentiment, but I'm not sure, like in a practicality sense. So businesses can't necessarily design for everybody. So like, how do you then, like, you can't be everything to all people and in certain aspects. So how do you then prioritize those?
I think the word access, really. So again, it comes back to the customer, providing the choice for the customer to make those decisions on how Joe wants to speak to somebody and you want to talk to a bot at midnight. It's all about customer choice and preference. And, that's not easy. Otherwise, if it was, we wouldn't have jobs, me and Julie and Steve. And it's about considering all of that in the round and trying to make the best fit we can that can cover everything.
Yeah,
but you're right, you can't nail it.
I think there's an interesting correlation. So most of my time I spend talking about content marketing, content strategy versus how to implement the customer service side. And one of our major talking points everyone frequently asks is, do you have to be in every channel? Do you have to do video? Do you have to do podcast? Do you have to do writing? Do you have to meet? And in content marketing, it's so important. There's a couple of things that are important. One is to meet your audience where they are. The second is with the content that they're looking for. There's actually three. And the third is to be really good at one of them. And so I feel like the inverse is totally true with customer experience, which is like, you just have to nail one channel. So if I'm going to be great at email response or chat response or phone response, my customers are going to be like, oh, they get back to me within 5 minutes with what I need. If I do email, I freaking hate email, but I'll do it. So for me, the first step is to know that you're doing one of them, and then expanding into what you could do afterwards is like meeting them where they'd like to be, I think becomes a lot easier, and you get the luxury. For me, the speed component is the piece that I don't think we've talked about as much. Is you're going to be different speed in every channel, unless you're just completely above a level that I'm at currently. But I think is to look at the speed of the response and making sure you're getting there, and then to focus on the ones that you use the most. So we are slowly making it into the real-time channels versus the time lag email channel. And I spent 12 years doing a marketplace-based SaaS call center business, and I never want to get to that point again.
Yeah. And Steve, I'll add to that too. I do think it's by channel and also by like size of organization, right? Like as you scale and your customer base shifts, there are different expectations on urgency and accuracy. And I know that sounds sort of crazy because it's like, it should always be urgent and accurate, but I think about being sort of earlier stage at the two companies I've been at recently. And for a period of time, like a lot of your customer base, if you're a very small business, are sometimes the early adopters who have a little bit more tolerance for the growth and development of those systems and programs. And so maybe you do have like one person who does all customer things. Fast forward, you have a handful of, enterprise companies who are used to working with Big Four consulting firms, in addition to all these other vendors that sit in their tech stack. The game's changed. And so that's been a learning I've had, which is like, how do you stay scrappy, but in service to the things that your customers need? But how do you look ahead and say, but we need the infrastructure to be prepared for who we're going to be 1, 2, 3 years from now? And being very honest. I think this is something that's important to talk about too, like very honest with how you present where you are. If you get asked for some of the enterprisey things that are very different than where you are when you're sort of in the early stages, being able to set that expectation so people can self-select then, so they're not surprised after if it's a different experience than maybe what they expect.
Absolutely. There's a comment here from Tricia who actually uses exactly the same word as you here, Julie. He says, I fall into both categories with Richard and Joe, depending on how urgent I need a resolution. answer depends on whether I call a human or use the chat features. So, you know, exactly that urgency, that speed that Steve spoke about, it is all those things. Julie, you also mentioned something quite interesting there, and it's interesting to hear it with yourself and then with Steve on here as well, because I don't want to be the will it scale guy, you know, but I mean, what are the lessons that you've learned over the course of time that sort of like have really, you know, either not scaled at all or you know, have been really hard lessons sort of over these past few years that I've
My
grown
gosh. My gosh. How long do we have? I'll pick maybe three.
24 minutes, go.
Yeah, three. Okay, so one is I talked about this a little bit earlier, but like very specifically, not making the decision early enough, or like not knowing when to say, okay, we are now a service team post sale versus very specific, unique experiences and service models for segments of customers. So customer segmentation happens at different times for different businesses, and so there's a period of time when everybody does everything for all customers, and you have to go through that segmentation. I'd say too is beyond customer segmentation, then it's like functional segmentation. So what is the purpose of somebody who does onboarding separate from the purpose of somebody who does CS work, from the purpose of someone who's an account manager or renewal manager? So like that is hard too, because it's all change management for your team, for your peers across different functions, and for your customers. So that is something, again, like naturally companies go through that's hard. And then I'd say, because I've been responsible for support at different times, time zone, location, localization. I think, you know, coming from my previous world, there was a time where it was like we have HQ and then international, and I would laugh sometimes, and it's like the rest of the world doesn't just sit in an international bubble. Like that's not how global works, you know. And like really being able to change your mindset, which is like, okay, there is you know, there's North Am and EMEA, and when you pop that balloon, like there's so much more to what it means to be a global business. And I mean, a whole hour could be dedicated to how we scraped our knees there. But those would, I'd say, be the top three: like the segmentation, the functional specificity that you have to get to, and then global growth.
I can see you nodding along there, Steve. I mean, is this resonating right now?
Sure. The good thing about being in business a really long time is you have lots of lessons learned. It's just trying to remember which ones you actually want to share. So the first one that comes to mind for me is like this entire conference that you guys organized is all about entering on the human. And for me, it's if you hire like companies that really inspire me are Southwest and Trader Joe's, who have this very like classic, like everyone needs to be friendly to just be part of our culture. We want every interaction with our people to make you feel better. And that's how they hire. And that's how I want to hire. And I believe if you do that, you build your culture and then it becomes part of your platform. So you don't have to think about it as much because these people aren't going to create non-people friendly platforms. The second is so we grew 300% in the last 3 years, bootstrapped. And so bootstrapped is a really different world. It means that you have the growth and then you try to catch up with how to service it, as opposed to you get the venture funding, then you build the servicing and then the people come. And so you ask from you know, sometimes you're going to grow a little too fast and your arms are no longer going to reach in your sleeves. And so there's a couple of things there. One is be very empathetic to your customers and honest when you're there. But most importantly is to know the different segments that are arising. So I feel like all of us create our segments and then we build our organizations around it. And then you're like, wow, that took 2 years. I don't want to go do that again. But making that vibrant and dynamic is critical. So we just went from having our average customer being a 4 blog post a month, $150 to $10,000 a month, to multiple customers at $80,000 a month. And we had to create a whole new structure. So we had to segment them and treat them differently. But we also, the third thing is we had to reorg and basically say, now everything that's client services and human touch that we thought was on top of the platform is the platform. So now the entire customer success team has to report up to product and development. And so basically I put one of my favorite people I ever worked with, who I first hired, who was my first hire 15 years ago, came back to be our CTO and COO to now bring all of those together, because now operations no longer sits outside of it. It has to be part of the product.
Amazing. That's really interesting. Actually, there does seem to be a whole new wave of, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we're seeing, obviously, within the SaaS world, there is this push to automate an awful lot, but then on the flip side, people are moving towards far more concierge sort of services as well. I don't know whether that's like an actual trend or whether that's just something that is happening. I mean, are you guys recognizing that as something that is a thing, or am I just talking rubbish?
Well, it's this perfect intersection, right? Of like, I want it immediately, like I want it right now here, automated, and I want it also to know exactly who I am, exactly what I want, and to be hyper personalized. So it's the intersection of technology and hyper personalization, and like you cannot get exactly what you want without those two things coming together. And if one of those things is off balance, it's a horrible experience. And to Joe, what you were saying earlier too about like some of the experiences maybe you have had in the past, and I saw somebody in chat talking about the call music. Like, so many of us are skeptical of those two worlds combined because you've had really terrible experiences with cable companies and other companies and talking to bots who are not giving you a good experience. And it's when you bring in that hyper personalization, when you sort of have this sort of magical wow moment, and you're like, oh, as a consumer, and I see this happening a lot more in B2C, like as consumers outside of SaaS tech world, this is just how our life really is right now. I can order dinner for my family while I'm sitting here, boop, 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 it knows what I want. And so I just find it fascinating because it's the intersection of technology, hyper personalization, but overcoming the biases people have about what they want or do not want and how they interact with technology.
Yeah, I feel so I spent 15 years in Silicon Valley doing the whole scene, and I felt like every interaction there was about how to lower the impact, the presence of humans in your technology, to suck them out, to have as little interaction with your customer base as possible. I can't tell if the trend is moving the other direction or I just want it to so badly. But I think the other piece of it is, so we're part of something that I hope is going to be a bigger trend. So we spent 15 years focused on SaaS. Now the product does everything by itself. We take every work type, we go deep into it, we offer it in the cloud flexibly with a deep understanding of your subject matter expertise. And what I think is the next big wave is how to combine that with skilled labor. So technology has used unskilled labor as widgets like Uber, where humans are basically just widgets in the system to deliver a service. And then we have Upwork and Craigslist, where you're helping connect two people, with a deeper skill set. You can really find the long tail of skills, but you're replicating the entire system of employment and all of the challenges that come there. And what I feel is coming is what I hope Verblio is part of, is a new mix of skilled marketplaces that are mixed with technology systems to deliver a bigger system or bigger service with humans.
I love it. That actually sounds like a quite positive future.
I hope so. Something's got to be. How's the election going, by the way? Has anyone seen the election? Tell me if the election gets decided while we're on this call.
Yeah, so
Keep refreshing my map.
It's too
actually, you've just given me a beautiful segue to my next question. So when starting a new client relationship at Six and Flow, we try to think about it as the start of a new presidency. So, which is obviously topical, as in, we think about it as in the first 100 days. So like, if you think about a new presidency, I'm not making assumptions of who's going to win. I'm just saying, if you think about a new presidency, the tone for that entire term is set within the first 100 days. And that's why like CNN and the BBC are constantly running like news programs in the background that talks about the first 100 days. And that's how we try to think about it. And like, because we're trying to set the tone in that relationship. So 2 questions. First is, do you think we're barking up the wrong tree with the way that we approach that? And the second is, how do you guys approach new client relationships? Barry, I've kind of answered it for you, seeing as you are the Six and Flow client service director, but you're also welcome to tell me I'm completely wrong because I don't work on the CS side.
I'll let the other guys go first and answer.
Yeah, Rich, I'll share. Like, the data proves it for us, and we built a data model to I'm looking behind me. There's a book I have called it was somewhere, it used to be, but you have to, it basically says like you have 90 days to win that customer over, and there are very specific things that happen, and effectively as soon as that contract is signed, momentum is lost. It's like driving off the lot with a car. Like you had all this anticipation and momentum buying it, now you have it. Is it what you wanted? Do you have buyer's remorse? And so you have to proactively get ahead of that. And the way to do that is by achieving the milestones, showing those value points, and being able to continue that excitement and get them to see value quickly. And for us, like we've basically gone through and done the math to realize, like, if you are not seeing value, and also if you're not set up properly, and for us it's 60 days. If you have not hit that clip by 60 days, our data tells us that you are far less likely to renew at the rates that our customers do renew at, who do hit that threshold, and you're far less likely to ever get healthy. So we think of it, a lot of companies will sort of set up like rehab programs for customers, unhealthy customers, and like that doesn't really work. And our take is like, you have to think about it as proactive and preventative health. And this is where too, in our previous conversations, we were talking a lot about being direct with customers and having hard conversations with customers. And, this is where you have to set the expectation of like, you've made a big investment in the thing that we offer, and these are the things that must happen in order for you to see value, and being very clear about that time frame. So we talk about it, we hold people accountable to it, we hold our CS team and our onboarding team accountable to it. We grab survey feedback from customers during that time frame and actually ask the question of, are you getting the return on investment you expected? And that to us is a leading indicator. Even if the data in their portal is telling us that they should be seeing value, if they personally or strategically aren't seeing it, there's a disconnect and we have to address it quickly. So from my point of view, from the data that we have, that is super important because it's very hard to recover once you get past that time frame.
Yeah, I'll say there's a few learnings from our side. So one is it really depends on what type of contracts your company has. So if you're selling annual contracts, you have a lot of time to catch up. You're building a strategic partnership, they already agreed to it. So you might have bad customer service levels after a couple months, but you could make it up in the race. And I won't make another election comparison right now. So I've worked for multiple different kind of companies with the same monthly SaaS revenue model. And in that case, it definitely depends. The first the breakoff point is exactly 3.5 months for us, which is like, that's where the breakoff point is. After that, customers will stay with us ongoing. But we're also really aligned with our agency clients that are mostly selling 3-month clients. So they have 3 months too, which is really interesting. So we kind of are in this together to win that client over. So I think, and the other thing that jumped into my mind was you were talking about the 90-day book. So one of the most impactful books for me that I read was the first 90 days about being a new hire at a company. You have the time. Is that the one you were talking about, Julie?
No, so I've read that one too, though, which is fabulous. So there's one for I'll find the author. It's somewhere in my house. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But the same book you're talking about, they made like a customer version of it.
Oh, it's like the 4-hour everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. So the 90 days for yourself, I thought was really impactful. You show up and you have this. One of the biggest guidance I mentor people on when they go into a new company is like, you can totally reframe yourself and who you are. Like you have all this baggage from your last company, all the things that drove you crazy. You were known as the junior person who worked, her way up and never got seen as the executive that you've now become. Well, walk in as an executive. And so we try to think of our first 90 days experience in a similar way.
I love that reframing piece, like that. Yeah, I've never heard anybody talk about it before. It's great. You walk into a new environment and you can dictate what you are in that environment. I love that.
That's awesome.
Just talking about Six and Flow, we're slightly different in as much that where we are selling services, we are selling tech or tech stacks, but we're also selling ideas, and that puts a completely different perspective to how we help beyond the 90 days. So for us, it's about getting through the 90 days in as seamless way as possible and delivering and executing on all of the things that we promised that we would, and showing the value. But then it's painting the picture of the future, and ideas do that for us. So we've got to quickly think on behalf of the customer. As soon as we're getting to know where they're headed, what they're trying to achieve, be thinking ahead of the curve. And that's where we get beyond our 90 days and into a long-standing relationship.
And Julie, it's interesting. Like one of the words I think you used earlier, and I'm hoping you did, and I'm not just making this up, but
I'll call you on
said-
it if you are.
Yeah,
So.
I'm pretty sure you used the word momentum earlier. And so like my day job is, other than just being like the eye candy that sits at the top of the company and kind of swanning about. Don't you tut at me, Joe.
You do it so well.
other than that, is I sit primarily on the sales side and like on our kind of marketing and sales side and the growth team. Barry sits on the customer success side. So like it goes from sales to delivery. And one of the things that historically as an agency, so we've got a sales process that is it's playful, it's representative of us, and it showcases what we deliver as a service. And as when people are going through that process, what we want from them ideally is to go, I want that. I want what you've just done to me, and I want to buy that. And that's our ideal process. So the momentum we have going through that is incredible. And then where we were struggling is that handover piece from sales to customer success. And we were losing the momentum. And within the first few weeks, we were then having to ramp it back up. So we focused heavily on that piece. So like on that basis, and I think there's a question in that, is how do you guys link sales and customer success so that there's not a drop off? It doesn't feel like the classic handoff. I mean, everybody's gone through a sales process where they bought someone where it's been a junior who's then gone, oh yeah, you qualify, now you can speak to the boss. Like shitty experience. But it's the same if you're being handed off from one department to the other. So how do you guys manage that process?
Yeah, I'm going to try to describe this without using too many analogies, but what we found, and this is something we're putting a lot of effort into next year, because we see the same thing and have been inspecting it and trying to learn where the gaps are. And it's the equivalent to, if you make a big purchase, right? Like the sales process is exciting and you're usually working with somebody who's exciting and showing you basically like the baseline level things that are going to get you excited enough for you to have the reaction you just mentioned, Rich, which is like, ooh, I want that. What they're not showing you is like all the pieces in the box and the instructions and all of the other things. And usually what happens, and particularly in our world, because this is SaaS technology, you come over the other side and it's like, great, well, we have to set up the integrations and we have to do this and we need this person involved. And it's all of a sudden it went from this like really fun experience to all this stuff. But like, you also have to be realistic about the fact that if you want this to work, you have to get that stuff to be set up, and it can take time and involve people. And so how do you balance the reality of technical setup, onboarding, adoption, setup, usage, waiting for results, right? There's this like period of time that has to happen. That can be a little bit of a lag on momentum, while separating out the things that really you can take care of, or you can make more efficient, or you can align with something that creates a better experience. And so some people I've talked to about this, gamify it. Some people I talk to take some of those intersecting points of that very important time in a customer's life and try to align it with what else should be and could be happening. And so what I hear a lot of people talk about is like the parallel path. So you're coming in and there's this technical setup work that has to happen. And we are going to ensure that these steps take place over this period of time. While that's happening though, we're going to go super deep on strategy. We're going to focus on this. And so it's up to us to curate that and direct people in the right way, and bringing on people who see that and understand that. And I spoke earlier about silos, and I do think what can happen, I'm a consultant, analyst. I am not somebody who like was born and grew up in the sales world. And the way in which you engage is very different. And I do think sales people in our world, on like CS onboarding, whoever we are, can learn a lot from sales and what goes into that. And sales can also learn a lot from us, and making sure that those teams engage not just for alignment, but for genuinely understanding that journey of that path for the customer. And if you're doing it well, it shouldn't feel like there's an interruption and they've driven into a completely different world. It should feel like an extension and they're just on to the next milestone.
Absolutely agree.
Yep. And so when I think of it, so we're at a pretty different place. We have we bring in 1,000 customers a year, and until last year we had one salesperson. So the amount of handoff that is going off is not that much. So I think of it as people, process, and product, like most of us do, as we think about what are the tools we have in order to solve things. So for the first for me is on the people side, which is that I hire salespeople that are not very salesy. Like, I want to hire salespeople that are really honest. I'd rather lose more sales that are bigger sales and have more credibility to them. And so I think a lot of this comes back to the people. We're at a small enough organization that if our sales team sets up something that the account team doesn't like, they're going to hear about it every single day. So the second is processes. As we moved up market, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot more of these larger accounts we have to win. So it's really syncing up and building in those processes. One is the handover. You have to have the deep dive. The second is a follow-up meeting must be scheduled with sales and account management for some time in the future, preferably 2.5 months. So we get before that 90 days. So the sales team knows it's coming. And the third is that we meet every week to go through all over our top strategic accounts, where they're at. So the sales team is being asked, like, you'll never get all that information in. You'll always forget about something you said in the sales process, that you promised something, but to actually have a focused place for it, and we can hold ourselves accountable and have an open forum, has been really helpful.
It's great.
So we've only got a few minutes left, and we haven't opened it up to the floor at all because we've just been hogging all of your time. So and nobody's got any questions in the Q&A. So I still have a ton more questions, but I want to open it up and make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask a question. So if anybody's got anything they want to ask Barry, Julie, or Steve, then by all means throw them in the Q&A panel. We'll give a few seconds to people to throw some stuff in there. But how can people connect with you guys? So if they want to check out Verblia, Drift, Six and Flow, or connect with you guys individually, what's the best way for them to do it?
I'll say go to drift.com and just chat right in.
Cool. For us, you can go to verblio.com. We try to make the site as fun as possible. Verblio. I also have a weekly podcast called The Verblio Show, which we have a lot of these. The goal is to have as many engaging conversations with inspiring marketers as we can find.
And likewise with me, sixandflow.com. And you can hook me up on LinkedIn as well.
That too.
Great. Right. It doesn't look like the floor's got any other questions. So we'll leave on one final question. Predictions for the next 2021. What's going to change in CS?
I think you're going to continue to see a lot of emphasis on not just CS, but the entire post-sale experience. More about customer marketing, more about customer experience, and more about how we continue to drive forward with some of the things that have changed perhaps for the better for our customers. The way people buy, the way people are able to engage with technology, and how we adapt to that.
Steve?
I think one of the big trends that we're all recognizing is the breakdown between our two separate selves, our work self and our personal self, in every aspect of our life. And a lot of that conversation has been about marketing and sales needing to be more empathetic, to enter on the human, to start off having engaging conversations. And I think that's going to flow through, and I think it's going to be a lasting trend that's going to last. It's going to take us a long time to recover from this crisis. But I think that's going to flow through to customer success too, as we think about how do we enter on the human every possible interaction we can.
And my view would be we are probably entering into the world of a more empowered customer who is going to put more emphasis on what we as vendors need to do more and more. So I think vendors are going to lose control and customers are going to gain more control, and we need to adapt and pivot and do all the things necessary.
If I can add one thing to that, Barry, too, customers are looking for partners, not vendors.
Absolutely.
And so I think they will.
You're right. Yes.
Feeling the difference between being a vendor and a partner will be something that companies focus on a lot.
Julie, you actually tweeted, was it last week or the week before? It's something about there's nothing worse in a relationship when somebody refers to you as a vendor. So
it's so true. You feel it right here.
Yeah, cuts deep. Right. I think that's us. Joe, have you got anything to add?
No, I really, really enjoyed that. The time flew by, didn't it? It really did. I can't believe it's now.
Yeah,
can't believe it's 2
I really
days.
enjoyed that. Yeah, 2 days, but like guys, that was like a great conversation for an hour. Like Joe says, it flew past, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, it's a nice way to round off a Friday night and 2 days of fun talk. So thank you very much for doing that. And like one last time, thanks to our sponsor AdRoll. Go check them out on adroll.com/community. And thank you from our hearts, from me and Joe. Like the community element of this has really kind of sprung up around us, and we're enjoying watching it happen.
Absolutely, it's really great fun. We're just making it up as we go along, but that's a fun
Yeah,
ride.
absolutely. We have no idea what we're doing, but like it seems to have worked for 2 days. So we'll definitely fuck it up on the next one.
Definitely.
Congratulations on a great event. Thanks for including us. This was awesome.
And good luck watching the elections come in, guys.
Yeah.
We need it. Fingers crossed.
See you later,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.